You wake up in the middle of the night with that taste in your mouth. Bitter, pasty, like someone squeezed bile onto your tongue while you slept. You get up, drink water, brush your teeth, chew a piece of gum, and 20 minutes later the taste is back. That bitterness that rises from the throat that sticks to the back of your mouth like a shadow that refuses to leave. And this didn't happen once. It happens every night, or every morning, or after meals, for weeks, months, sometimes years. You've been to the dentist, changed your toothpaste, had your teeth cleaned, searched the internet, and the bitter taste is still there, as if something inside is rising, leaking, contaminating your mouth with a flavor that shouldn't exist there. And then comes that question that torments you in silence. Am I really sick? Is it the stomach? Is it the liver? Is it something worse that nobody can find? I need to tell you something that probably none of the doctors who've seen you so far have said in these words. When you taste bitterness in your mouth, especially in the early morning hours and upon waking, your liver is talking to you. It's sending a message through the only pathway it has to reach your conscious awareness, taste. And the message is urgent. I'm Dr. James Carter, over 20 years of clinical practice. Today I'll reveal the 7 hidden causes of bitter taste in your mouth that nobody has explained. When we reach cause number 3, you'll understand why a silent bacterium living in your stomach could be the real culprit behind the bitterness that haunts you every morning. And at the end, I'll teach you a 2-ingredient biliary tea that cleans the bile ducts and costs almost nothing to make. But first, where does the bitter taste come from? Because when you understand the origin, everything makes sense. The bitter taste comes from a substance called bile. Bile is a yellowish-green liquid, extremely bitter, produced by the liver. Your liver manufactures between 500 and 1,000 milliliters of bile every single day, half a liter to a full liter, every day, without stopping. What is bile for? It's the body's detergent. When you eat fat, bile is released into the small intestine and breaks fat molecules into pieces small enough to be absorbed. Without bile, fat isn't digested. It sits in the intestine, causing gas, bloating, fatty diarrhea, and the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K pass straight through without entering the body. The normal pathway of bile. Liver produces it, bile flows down through the hepatic duct, gets stored in the gallbladder. When you eat fat, the gallbladder contracts. Bile is released into the intestine. Bile does its job. Bile is reabsorbed in the intestine and returns to the liver through the blood. Cycle restarts. This cycle is called enterohepatic circulation and happens 6 to 12 times per day. When everything works, you never taste bile. It's born in the liver, works in the intestine, and returns to the liver without ever rising to the mouth. You don't even know it exists. Bitter taste in the mouth means bile has left its normal pathway. It went up. It reached where it shouldn't be, the stomach, the esophagus, the throat, the mouth. And when bile touches your tongue, the bitterness is unmistakable. Not a medicine taste, not a spoiled food taste, a metallic, deep bitterness that comes from within. The question nobody asks, why is bile going up? What mechanism is pushing it in the wrong direction? Let's go through the 7 causes, from 7th to 1st, from most subtle to most urgent. The 7th cause, chronic dehydration that turns bile into sludge. Healthy bile is liquid, fluid, with the consistency of herbal tea. Flows easily through bile ducts like water through a clean pipe. But when the body is chronically dehydrated, bile concentrates, becomes thicker, more viscous, more like dark honey. Concentrated bile doesn't flow well, it sticks in the ducts, moves slowly, and when it should be in the intestine working, it stays stagnant in the gallbladder or channels, fermenting. Stagnant bile ferments. Fermented bile irritates. Irritated bile refluxes. And bile reflux rises, reaches the stomach. From the stomach rises to the esophagus. From the esophagus reaches the throat. From the throat, bitter taste in the mouth. Most adults over 50 don't drink enough water. Worse, they take medications that dehydrate. Blood pressure diuretics, excessive coffee. And nobody connects. I'm dehydrated, my bile is thick, my bile doesn't flow. Bile reflux, bitter taste. The simplest solution, a glass of warm water on an empty stomach, every day, before anything else. Warm water, not cold. The warmth stimulates bile flow. Bile softens, flows down, does its job, and doesn't rise anymore. And right here I need to stop. Because what I'm showing you isn't just about bile mechanics. The connection between liver health, bile quality, and cardiovascular health is inseparable. When the liver is congested and producing toxic bile, the same inflammatory state damages your blood vessels, weakens your heart, and accelerates aging throughout every organ. This is exactly why CardioShield is critically relevant. This natural formula with hawthorn leaf, olive leaf extract, green tea, and garlic supports the cardiovascular system that your liver depends on for adequate blood flow. Hawthorn leaf strengthening the heart that pumps blood through the liver for proper filtration and bile production. Olive leaf extract fighting the chronic inflammation that congests liver tissue and degrades bile quality. Green tea providing antioxidant defense that protects hepatocytes from oxidative damage. Garlic supporting healthy blood flow and blood pressure, the critical factors that determine whether your liver receives enough blood to produce clean bile. I can only help the first 5 people who act now. More than 200 people have experienced the difference. Doctor, I took omeprazole for 4 years for the bitterness and it never improved. After starting the right approach with CardioShield and dietary changes, the bitter taste disappeared in 3 weeks for the first time in 4 years. Miracle product. Link in first pinned comment. 180-day guarantee, 0 risk. The 6th cause, bile reflux, bile going up to the wrong place. There's a reflux that is not the acid reflux everyone knows. Acid reflux is stomach acid rising into the esophagus. Bile reflux is bile from the intestine rising into the stomach and from there to the esophagus and mouth. They are 2 different types of reflux with different treatments. Bile reflux happens when the pyloric valve, located at the stomach's exit and supposed to prevent intestinal contents from returning, doesn't close properly. Bile that was released into the intestine returns to the stomach and from there rises. The problem: antacids and omeprazole do not treat bile reflux. They treat acid reflux. If your bitterness doesn't improve with omeprazole, it may be because the problem is not acid, it's bile. And bile isn't acidic, it's alkaline. Taking antacid for bile reflux is like taking headache medicine when the problem is in your knee. Wrong target entirely. The 5th cause, a sluggish gallbladder that doesn't empty properly. The gallbladder is a pear-shaped sac attached under the liver. It stores bile between meals. When you eat fat, it receives a hormonal signal called cholecystokinin and contracts, squeezing bile into the intestine. Strong contraction equals complete emptying equals everything works. But in many people, especially over 50, the gallbladder becomes sluggish, contracts halfway, doesn't empty completely. Bile stays stagnant for hours. Stagnant bile concentrates. Over-concentrates and starts forming crystals. Crystals become biliary sludge. Sludge becomes gallstones. And stagnant bile refluxes. Signs of sluggish gallbladder. Bitter taste that worsens after eating fatty food. Heaviness or discomfort just below the ribs on the right side. Slow digestion of fatty foods. Bitter burping. What stimulates proper gallbladder contraction? Bitter foods. The very bitterness that bothers you is the key to the solution. Bitters stimulate cholecystokinin release, which makes the gallbladder contract more forcefully and empty completely. Dandelion root tea, artichoke, bitter arugula. The bitter taste isn't something to avoid, it's something to use, the medicine that looks like the poison. And here I cannot continue without interrupting, because the sluggish gallbladder producing stagnant bile and the congested liver producing dirty bile and the bile reflux sending it upward are all connected to one underlying problem: systemic inflammation and inadequate blood flow to the hepatobiliary system. And that is precisely what CardioShield addresses. The gallbladder won't contract properly if the liver can't produce quality bile. The liver can't produce quality bile if blood flow is inadequate. Blood flow is inadequate when the cardiovascular system is struggling. CardioShield supports every link in that chain. Hawthorn for cardiac output, delivering blood to the liver. Olive leaf for the inflammation congesting hepatocytes. Green tea for oxidative protection of liver cells. Garlic for blood pressure and flow to the hepatobiliary system. More than 200 people. Doctor, my bitter taste lasted 3 years. Nobody tested for H. pylori. Nobody differentiated bile reflux from acid reflux. After the right approach, the bitterness disappeared in 4 weeks. Miracle product, only 5 first people, link in first pinned comment. 180-day guarantee, 0 risk. The 4th cause, a congested liver producing dirty bile. This is the cause at the root of everything. The liver is the organ that manufactures bile. If the liver is healthy, bile is clean, fluid, and efficient. If the liver is congested, overloaded, inflamed, bile comes out dirty, thick, and toxic. What congests the liver? Alcohol, even in social quantities. Excess sugar, especially fructose. Trans fats from ultra-processed foods. Medications processed by the liver, which means virtually all of them. Environmental pollution. Pesticides in food. The congested liver is like a factory with old machines trying to process double capacity. The product that comes out, the bile, is defective. Defective bile doesn't digest fat properly. Defective bile irritates the digestive tract. And defective bile refluxes more easily because the entire system is dysregulated. Signs most people ignore. Chronic, unexplained fatigue. Yellowish or grayish skin. Deep dark circles under the eyes. Heavy digestion. And bitter taste in the mouth, especially in the early morning hours, when the liver is at its peak detoxification activity between 1 and 3 a.m. Modern circadian rhythm research confirms hepatic metabolic activity peaks during these hours. If you wake up between 1 and 3 a.m. with bitter taste, that is your liver speaking, literally. The third cause, the silent bacterium living in your stomach, Helicobacter pylori. H. pylori infects approximately half the world's population. Most infected people don't know, no obvious symptoms. The bacterium lives there, silent for years, decades. What does H. pylori have to do with bitter taste? It alters stomach motility. The infected stomach contracts in a discoordinated way. The pyloric valve, which should prevent bile reflux, becomes dysfunctional. Bile that should stay in the intestine returns to the stomach, and from there rises. Additionally, H. pylori causes chronic inflammation of the gastric lining. Inflamed mucosa produces less protective mucus. Bile contacting unprotected mucosa causes intense irritation and triggers more bitter reflux upward. The test is simple: urea breath test or fecal antigen test, both inexpensive and non-invasive. Treatment is specific antibiotics for 7 to 14 days. And in many cases, the bitterness the person carried for years disappears in 2 to 3 weeks after bacterial eradication. If you have persistent bitter taste and have never been tested for H. pylori, this could be the test that changes everything. The second cause, medications you take daily that intoxicate bile. Metformin for diabetes. One of the most common side effects is metallic or bitter taste in the mouth. Directly affects taste perception and alters bile metabolism. Antibiotics, especially metronidazole and clarithromycin, alter the bacterial flora that metabolizes bile in the intestine. Improperly metabolized bile refluxes more easily. Statins for cholesterol like simvastatin and atorvastatin. Processed by the liver, they can overload bile production and alter bile composition. ACE inhibitors for blood pressure like enalapril and captopril can cause dysgeusia, taste alteration that includes persistent bitter taste. Do not stop any medication on your own, never. But bring this information to your doctor. Doctor, I noticed my bitterness started when I began taking this medication. Is there an alternative? The first cause, an inflamed gut that recycles toxic bile back to the liver. This is the deepest cause, the one that feeds all the others. The bile cycle depends on healthy intestinal bacteria. In the intestine, beneficial bacteria transform primary bile into secondary bile. Secondary bile is reabsorbed and returns to the liver to be recycled. When the gut microbiome is imbalanced, the wrong bacteria metabolize bile in a toxic way. Toxic bile returns to the liver. Liver receives dirty bile, produces dirty bile. Dirty bile refluxes, bitter taste. It's a vicious cycle. Sick gut produces toxic bile. Liver receives toxic bile, produces toxic bile. Toxic bile refluxes and further inflames the gut. Round and round. Restoring the gut microbiome is the key to breaking the cycle. Homemade sauerkraut, 2 to 3 tablespoons daily. Plain kefir before bed. Real oatmeal in the morning. Eliminate ultra-processed foods. In 4 to 6 weeks, many patients report the bitterness begins to soften because the factory of toxic bile was shut down at the root. Practical protocol. 2-ingredient biliary tea. 2 tablespoons of dried dandelion root plus 1 teaspoon of crushed milk thistle seeds. 1 cup of boiling water poured over the herbs. Cover, steep 15 minutes. Strain. Drink warm, 30 minutes before lunch. Dandelion is one of the most potent natural bile stimulants documented. Stimulates both production and flow of bile. Milk thistle, its active compound silymarin, protects liver cells and improves the quality of bile produced. Together, cleaner, more fluid bile that flows in the right direction. Additional allies: warm lemon water on empty stomach, steamed artichoke 2 to 3 times per week, turmeric with black pepper, raw grated beet in salads, extra virgin olive oil on empty stomach, 1 tablespoon, stimulates gallbladder contraction. 3 golden rules. First, don't skip breakfast. The gallbladder needs the signal to contract and empty. Prolonged fasting equals stagnant bile equals concentrated bile equals crystals equals reflux. Second, eliminate trans fats and refined sugar, the 2 biggest liver congestion agents. Margarine, cream-filled cookies, soda, industrial white bread. Third, sleep on your right side. The gallbladder sits on the right side of the body under the liver. When you lie on your right, gravity helps the gallbladder drain. Lying on the left can compress the gallbladder and hinder emptying. If you wake with bitterness at night, turn to your right side. Everything I taught you, the 7 causes, the tea, the protocol, all of it works as a system. And the foundation of that system is a body where inflammation is controlled, circulation is healthy, and the liver receives what it needs to produce clean bile. That is what CardioShield supports 24/7. Hawthorn for the heart pumping blood to every hepatocyte. Olive leaf for the inflammation congesting the liver. Green tea for antioxidant protection of liver cells. Garlic for the blood flow that makes bile production possible. More than 200 people. Gastroenterologists impressed. Bitter taste gone. Mornings restored. Miracle product. Link in first pinned comment. 180-day guarantee, 0 risk. Bitter taste is not something to ignore. It's your liver calling for help through the only pathway available. 7 causes, each with a solution. None solved by toothpaste. Take care of your liver. It takes care of everything else. I'm Dr. James Carter.